Today's lesson is How will AI change life in the future? Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
And I'm Roger.
And we are back with day 2 of our look at AI and its possible effects in many ways on our lives in going into the future. We've heard from teachers talking about how it could be great to personalize lesson plans for certain students, but also how students are already using AI to cheat in their classes, to have the computer programs write their essays for them and things like that. We also had a software developer who thought it could be great for coding and debugging basic programs, so that would allow he and his fellow human computer programmers to work on more interesting things. And there was Mike, the marketing manager, who thought that AI would be great for reaching out and attracting new customers with personalized AI advertising and content like that, in the same way that the software developer thought that AI can do the hard, boring work, allowing him to do more creative stuff. I think for Mike, the marketing manager, there was a similar appeal to AI. It can help to do a lot of the number crunching and the data processing that marketing people rely on to understand their markets, and then that can allow the actual human marketing managers like Mike to basically have a really good way of reaching out to customers very directly, very personally using AI algorithms. So today we're going to turn our attention to a few other people. We have a student coming up, an illustrator, someone who works in graphic design, very interesting, a doctor, an environmental activist, and we'll wrap things up with a retiree who might kind of say, AI, I don't know and I don't care, I'm too old. We're going to have to find out by listening to the article. So let's begin with Max and Darren and hear their opinions on how AI might help or hinder their lives in the future.
Max, 22, college student.
AI has been a huge help for me when it comes to essays and research. On the other hand, I definitely worry about how it'll affect my job prospects in the future.
Darren, 40, illustrator.
To be honest, AI scares the hell out of me. I know freelance illustrators who are already losing work to AI image generators, so I'm afraid it'll just be a matter of time before I'm out of a job.
大家好，第一部分介绍名词 prospect， 它的意思是前景、预期、展望或是发生的可能性。例如 Joey is a talented musician with a lot of prospects ahead of him. Joey 是位才华横溢的音乐家，他的前景广阔。或者 Andrea's experience and skills make her a leading prospect for the job. Andrea 的经验和技能使她成为这份工作最有可能的候选人。接着看到 freelance 这个单字，它是形容词，表示从事自由职业的或是作为自由职业者的。例如 Freelance writers often contribute articles to various publications. 自由接案者常向各种出版品公稿。或是 Jim decided to pursue a freelance career after years of working in an office. Jim 在办公室工作多年后，决定从事自由职业。再来看到动词 generator， 它的意思是产生器，也可以是发电机的意思。例如 The new image generator can create realistic pictures from simple sketches. 新的图像产生器可以从简单的素描中创造出逼真的图片。也可以说 A generator was used to produce electricity at the camping area. 露营区使用发电机发电。
Okay, let's begin by talking about Max here. He's young, he's 22, and he's a college student, a university student, you could also say. And he says, AI has been a huge help for me when it comes to essays and research. Okay, that much can be easily understood. We just got done talking about ChatGPT in our last program. And of course, lots of students use that to write their essays. And I guess you could also use AI to do your research, to look for information, especially if you're using the internet and you tell the program what to look for and they'll find it for you. On the other hand, I definitely worry about how it'll affect my job prospects in the future. So usually when we compare two things, one good and one bad, or one bad and one good, in the middle we use on the other hand. You could start by saying on the one hand, blah, 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 but on the other hand, and then you kind of talk about the opposite thing. So first of all, he's saying that it will be helpful to him, but on the other hand, or you could say, however, he's still worried about his future job prospects. Will AI take away those jobs and he'll have to live under a bridge somewhere?
Oh, that would not be good if, yes, there were no jobs in the future because very smart computer programs were doing everything for us. Because, of course, yeah, students, when they leave school, they are hoping for many job prospects. A prospect is sort of like a possible option in the future, a possible choice that you might make, or a possible opportunity that you might have. So job prospects are basically available jobs out there that might be appealing to you and that you might be a good fit for. And yes, if AI is doing all of the jobs, then there will be very few job prospects for both Max and many young people like him. Let's turn our attention now to Darren. Darren, it says, is 40 years old and he is an illustrator. So he's kind of a graphic designer. He draws pictures and graphics and things for books, magazines, articles in newspapers, who knows, and of course on the web as well. So he's working in a visual arts type of field, but a bit more on the commercial side. He's not as much of an artist as he is, as it says here, an illustrator. It says, to be honest, this is Darren's opinion, AI scares the hell out of me. Well, there's a very honest opinion. He's frightened of AI, probably not in terms of it's going to unleash killer robots on the world, but more in the terms of job prospects, like Max was just talking about. That's why it scares the hell out of me. It frightens him very much. He says, I know freelance illustrators who are already losing work to AI image generators. Ooh. So I'm afraid it'll just be a matter of time before I'm out of a job. So he's one of those guys who feels right in the crosshairs, right in the danger zone of AI taking his job. It's not one of those physical jobs that you might not have a robot able to do for a long time. If you're working with data information, if you're working in creative fields, especially like being a graphic designer or an illustrator, AI could definitely take your job in the near future. And he already knows people this is happening to. Freelance illustrators. Someone who works freelance basically works for themselves and they try to find customers to hire them. They're not working for a large company or a large organization. They're a one-person unit and basically they go out and they have to try to find jobs out there. So if you're a freelance taxi driver, that means you might be driving an Uber instead of driving a yellow cab for one of the big established taxi companies. That's the kind of thing we think of with these jobs that people can find online, these zero-hour contracts where basically the company says, we'll pay you when we have work for you, but otherwise we're not going to give you a salary. You're kind of working freelance. You're working on your own, and you are your own boss, but you're also responsible for finding your own work. So some of his friends who do that are already losing work. Companies they used to work for are saying, we're going to save some money. We won't pay you. We'll just use the AI programs. These AI image generators are very powerful, especially if you want basic, simple, clear images with no sort of artistic content to them. We just want a picture of something and we don't want it to be fancy or special. Just make it nice and simple. The AI image generators can do that very, very well. A generator in this case is not sort of a power plant. We can think of a small power plant as a generator, something you put gas in, turn it on, and it makes electricity. Not like that, but in a way it is like that because to generate is to make something. But here it's not making power, it's making images, it's making pictures. You could have a speech generator that has the computer, gives the computer the ability to talk or things like that. So basically software programs that use AI to create images, to create and to generate are very similar. So that's why we call these things image generators. So he says, I'm afraid it'll just be a matter of time before I'm out of a job. If it's a matter of time or just a matter of time, that means it's not long from now into the future. I don't know exactly when, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. I wouldn't be making big plans into the distant future. It's just a matter of time before something happens. In other words, it will happen, if not soon, then not too long into the future.
I have nothing to add to what you said there, Mike, so let's move on now to Rachel and find out what she has to say. She's a doctor, and how is AI affecting her? Let's find out.
Rachel, 61, doctor. AI is already being used to improve diagnostics and treatment plans, but I don't think it can replace the empathy and judgment of a human doctor. It should only be used to assist trained medical professionals, not in place of them.
第二部分介绍名词 professional 它的意思是专业人员或是专家。例如 Most of the people on this stage are professionals. 这个台上的人大多是专业人士。又或者说 You should go to a professional if you want your computer fixed. 如果你想要修好你的电脑，就该去找专业人士。
Okay, so again, Rachel is a doctor and she's 61 years old, and here's what she says. AI is already being used to improve diagnostics and treatment plans, but I don't think it can replace the empathy and judgment of a human doctor. So, of course, if you're a doctor, you need to have a diagnosis of your patient. You need to know about their symptoms. You need to ask them questions. And, of course, you interview them in the office and maybe you give them some tests and things like that, and you interpret the tests. So that's all a part of diagnostics, trying to figure out exactly what's wrong with the patient and what you should do to help them. And yes, AI is being used to improve diagnostics. So I suppose they talk to the patient and then they enter the symptoms into the computer program or whatever, and they enter as much information as they possibly can. And then the computer comes back and says, well, this is probably the patient's problem, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they should try this medication or this treatment or whatever. But she says still AI cannot replace the empathy and judgment of a human doctor. Yeah, doctors have that empathy, that feeling for the patients. A computer is cold, they don't care, and you got to have a human doctor there to know exactly how you feel.
That is a big part of course, the patient experience and also for the families. When the patient receives bad news, the families often suffer emotionally just as much or in some cases more, especially if the patient is elderly or something like that. So yeah, the human touch, these human emotions that come through empathy, come through understanding someone's feelings and feeling bad when they feel bad, that kind of thing. And the judgment of a human doctor, of course, the ability to know exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. You don't want the computer just to say your grandmother is going to die or something like that in a very cold, brutal kind of way. To have a little bit of a human touch, some human emotions there would definitely help people, especially people faced with a bad diagnosis that could end up giving them a chance to fight it. If they're told that it's a very grim situation right at the beginning, that might definitely affect effectively. These patients can respond to the treatment and maybe even heal in the future. So you do need a bit of kindness in there that maybe the machines can't quite reproduce. Rachel goes on to say it should only be used to assist trained medical professionals, not in place of them. So basically, don't fire your doctors and hire a bunch of robot AI doctors. Use them together as a team. The doctor, of course, will have the final say, but the doctor can consult with the AI program to get the best information, maybe also to get the best recommendations for treatment, right? Doctors' knowledge isn't perfect all the time, so the AI might have some more of the latest information, the latest research data that could be used, but using it with these trained medical professionals. Here we mean doctors, doctor assistants, nurses, people like that. If you're a professional, you're doing something at a very high level as a job, and you've probably been specially trained to do that. So a medical professional, someone who has been trained to work in a hospital, work with patients, and understand human biology and all of that. So do it with the doctors, work with the doctors, not in place of them. Don't replace the doctors with the AI, but have them be a better, more effective team while still having that human touch. That sounds like a pretty good plan for the future and the future health of both patients and the medical system. Let's move on to Sasha now. We're going to finish off with Sasha, who's an environmental activist, and then wrap things up with the lovely Grace, who is a retiree. Let's hear what they think about AI right now.
Sasha, 30, environmental activist. AI could help us address some environmental problems by improving things like climate modeling. But it's also got some obvious downsides, including heavy carbon emissions. Grace, 76, retiree. As an older person, I don't expect AI to have much effect on me, but I do worry about how it'll affect my kids and grandkids. I think their world will be very different from the one I grew up in.
第三部分我们看到 activist 这个单字，它是名词，指的是行动主义者或是社会运动人士。举例来说 As an activist for the environment, Mona has taken part in several protests against pollution. 身为一位环境行动主义者 ，Mona 参与了好几次反对污染的抗议活动。又或者说 ，Political activists are demanding a change of government. 社会运动人士发起要求改变政府。最后看到名词 downside， 它表示不利因素或是缺点。我们可以说 City life offers lots of benefits, but noise and pollution are among its downsides. 城市生活提供许多好处，但噪音和污染是其中的缺点。也可以说 While life in the country can be more peaceful, a major downside is the lack of job choices. 虽然乡村的生活可以更加宁静，但一个主要的缺点就是工作机会的缺乏。
Now it's time to hear from Sasha, who is 30 years old, and she is an environmental activist. Okay, if you're an activist, of course, you're trying to bring about some change in a particular aspect of society. In this particular case, she wants people to be aware of environmental problems, of pollution and things like that. So she's an activist. She probably talks to politicians all the time to get them to change their policy or whatever. So here's her opinion. She says, AI could help us address some environmental problems by improving things like climate modeling. Okay, so of course, if you want to improve the environment or if you want to improve anything, you need to develop a model, which is like guessing what's going to happen in the future. You gather as much information as you can, and then you try to figure out what could possibly happen in the future. So this is modeling for the climate. So if you gather all this information, temperatures and wind speeds and various climate statistics, and you put them all together and use AI, then it will probably give you something very useful in terms of climate modeling. It will probably tell you what the weather is going to be like in the future, so you can make some changes to a country's use of energy resources and things like that to make things less dangerous in the future.
Absolutely, yeah, because a lot of those climate models require computers that are very powerful to run really big, complicated programs. And of course, that is a difficult technical task. But it also has a problem that kind of leads us into Sasha's other issue or other worry with AI. She says, but it's also got some obvious downsides, meaning using AI more and more. It's got some downsides, including heavy carbon emissions. Yeah, using computers that require a lot of hard work, that are crunching big numbers, like in climate modeling, it basically just produces a lot of heat and uses a lot of energy. I think people have already noticed that areas where they have those big Bitcoin farms, where you might have hundreds or thousands of computers all working together to mine Bitcoins, if that's your thing, they also drain a lot of power from the energy grid. And of course, that requires more burning of natural gas and fossil fuels and whatnot to make power. So that is a definite downside. A downside is a disadvantage, a negative, a con, one of the bad things about a certain situation or a certain proposal. There could be upsides, which are advantages and pros, the good things, and then the downsides are the negatives. They might be something you can live with, but of course, many things that we do will have negative effects in some kind of way. So that's an obvious negative, an obvious downside. Heavy carbon emissions. Yeah, producing a lot of greenhouse gas, a lot of CO2 by doing things, as I said, like burning fossil fuels and whatnot. So using more computers that require more power will require more power, and that will produce more pollution, is her basic point. So that's kind of an ironic thing. We're going to understand the damage we're going to do to the environment much better, but to understand it, we're going to have to do more damage to the environment, is kind of Sasha's conundrum here, the problem that they're facing. But like with a lot of things in modern life, it is finding the balance between what's good for humans and what's good for the environment, and often they're not the same. So let's move on to Grace. Now, what does Grace have to say? She's 76 and she's a retiree.
Right, that means she's retired, and she says, as an older person, because I am an older person, I don't expect AI to have much effect on me, but I do worry about how it'll affect my kids and grandkids. So she's retired, she's no longer working, so she's not concerned about how it's going to affect her job, whether it's going to take her job away from her or not. I might affect her in terms of when she goes to see the doctor or whatever. Maybe AI can help her out with some of her ailments or whatever, but still, she's very worried about how it's going to affect her children and her grandchildren, and that is a legitimate concern. She goes on to say, I think their world will be very different from the one I grew up in. Yes, it could be very different indeed. She probably grew up using a pen to write down her ideas on a piece of paper. She actually used a telephone at home, or she had to dial the number in order to make a phone call to somebody. She never knew what Uber Eats was. That's totally not part of her background. So, of course, she did not grow up in that kind of world. And, of course, it's a brave new world for everybody else who's growing up in the world of AI. Okay, we're at the end of our discussion for today. Here comes Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在课文第一部分，有一位大学生 Max， 他提到说，在论文和研究方面，人工智慧对他的帮助非常大，但另一方面，他确实会担心它会如何影响他未来的就业前景。文中是用到 when it comes to essays and research 来表达在论文和研究方面。when it comes to 是表达提到什么什么，就什么什么而论，或者是谈到什么什么。那这个片语通常是用来引导一个话题，带出跟主题相关的资讯。那么其中的 to 是介系词，所以后面要记得接名词或动名词。例如It's important to know your limits when it comes to swimming. 说到游泳，知道自己的极限在哪里是很重要的。好，那顺便补充一下 Speaking of 这个片语介系词则是用来引出跟前文相关的其他话题，表达说提到什么，说到什么什么。那这时候它后面也是要接名词或动名词。假设朋友聊到食物，那你刚好肚子饿想去吃点东西，这时候你就可以说 Speaking of food, I'm getting hungry. Let's go grab a bite. 说到食物，我肚子饿了，我们去吃点东西吧。好，另外文中它有用到单字 prospect 来指前景，那它也可以表达预期、展望或者是发生的可能性。我们来学习它的字首字根。好，spect 或者是拼作 spec 这一类字根，它有看、看见、查看的意思。那么在 prospect 这个字当中，它的字首 pro 表示向前，字根 spect 表示看。那当我们向前看，看向远方时会看到景色，所以 prospect 它可以指具体的景象景色，尤其是指从高处所看到的景色。不过它也有抽象的含义，可以用来指这个前景展望的意思。好，那这边顺便补充两个有相同字根的单字。第一个是 inspect， 它的字首 in 表示往内， spect 表示看，合在一起往里面仔细的看，应该就可以联想到 inspect 它有检视、检验或是审查的意思。那通常是为了找出是否有错误或问题而去仔细检查。第二个补充的是 suspect， 它的字首 sus 是来自 sub， 表示在下方，字根 spect 表示观看，那在底下偷偷观看观察，那就表示不信任咯。所以 suspect 这个字当形容词可以表达可疑的、不可信的，当名词可以表达嫌疑犯，那么当动词念作 suspect 则是表达怀疑或是猜疑。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Prospect. Zelda is very optimistic about her career prospects. Illustrator. The illustrator drew some beautiful pictures for the book. Generator.
The company uses an image generator to create unique graphics for its website.
Professional. We'll need to hire a professional to fix our electrical problem. Activist. Darla is an animal rights activist who often speaks out against eating meat. Downside. One downside of living in this building is the noise.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Time for our discussion starter. The question is, do you agree with the idea that students' use of AI in completing essays and other assignments could harm those students? Why or why not?
Well, I will say no, I don't think students could be harmed by using AI for assignments because they will be so engaged with their classes through personalized teaching plans, they won't spend even a moment thinking about how to cheat on things and how to cut corners because they'll just love school so much thanks to AI.
Well, that's one man's opinion, but I agree that such use could impact students negatively given the fact that the computer program is going to write the essay for them, and so students will have no idea how to write an introductory paragraph and then filling paragraphs after that and to write a conclusion at the end. They'll be totally lost, and when they go look for a job, no one will want to hire them.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.